Hey folks, welcome to a new video. Today we're just going to have a kind of fun, low-key little chat. The last couple videos have been on the more serious side, which I love going there. I love getting into the nitty-gritty and talking about feelings and motivation and all of that. That's probably some of my favorite territory in terms of conversations around art and creativity. But I thought we'd lighten it up a little bit today and do just something kind of fun and easy and accessible. So we are going to talk about 10 things to do, 10 ways to spend your time in the studio if for some reason you don't feel like drawing or painting. Okay, so number one is one that is probably my go-to, my favorite thing to do if I don't feel like drawing or painting and there's nothing that I particularly have to do in terms of a deadline, something that almost always will get me in the mood to draw and paint again, and that is to clean up my space and to organize old work. So right now, luckily, based on the camera angle, you can't see the absolute disaster that is around me, but there's, some stacks of work over there that need to get put away. There's pencils and pencil shavings all over my desk, and I have my computer kind of sitting on top of a couple of pencil holders because I don't want it to be sitting down in the pencil shavings themselves. Yeah, it is kind of a disaster in here, and so I know as soon as I have a minute, as soon as I have a little spare section of time where I can invest some work in cleaning this up, putting things away, getting organized, I am going to feel so much more able to creatively focus. And if for some reason my space is already clean, or if I have cleaned up and it's not gotten me back on track, not gotten me back to wanting to draw again, putting work away in portfolios often has that effect because I'll look at pieces and think, oh yeah, this was so much fun to make, or look what I did here, and it'll just kind of get me in the mood to draw and paint again. So cleaning up my space, putting things away always helps get me back on track. Number two is kind of related to number one, but it's to inventory or organize your supplies. So, if you're somebody who, like me, used to just keep, not even that long ago, like less than a year ago, I think, used to just keep all of my colored pencils in one giant box. And then I had one other kind of giant box that had my backup colored pencils in it. Getting organized, like getting them all into separate color organized containers, and then having an organization system, which you can kind of see behind me, for the backup colored pencils was so motivating, and it's made it so much easier to actually kind of keep on top of things. If you are not working with clients, or you're not making a ton of work and you're not churning through quite as many supplies as I do, I go through a lot of supplies. Inventory may not be as necessary for you, but if you do need inventory, with having your supplies organized in a way that makes it easy to look at them and see kind of at a glance what you need to reorder is just so helpful. And it's something I wasn't always able to do it because of different setups, but even after I had a setup where I could do it, it took me like a year to actually undertake that project. And it did take, probably the better part of a day, especially with the colored pencils, to get that all organized. But it has really paid off because it's made me, even more motivated. And also I spend less time now. It used to be whenever I'd have to reorder, I'd have to look through every single colored pencil I have and see which ones I really needed. Otherwise, I would just end up kind of reordering the same ones over and over again. So yes, organizing, inventorying supplies, making that work for you depending on, where you're at in your creative practice, how much you actually go through supplies, what your space is like, of course. But that's the second thing that I like to do in the studio if I am not in the mood to draw or paint. And number three is to clean up your digital space. This one, I'll be honest with you guys, I really hate doing this. There's like a very almost physical, primal satisfaction that comes from cleaning up a space. And it's just such a nice feeling to be in a clean space. And especially when it's been an absolute disaster and you get everything put away, it just is like it just feels good. I don't get that same payoff, that same emotional payoff when I organize my digital space, but still it is something that's really good to do. So depending on where you're at, depending on the type of work you create, how big the final files are, if you're actually transitioning things from, physical to digital, you may need different tools here. One of the tools that I like to use and I have used for years is Dropbox. And the way I do it is, this isn't like some fancy way, this is the way pretty much everybody does it, but I do selective sync. So that means that I can have Dropbox is like my kind of extended hard drive. So files that are really large or are older or are on client projects that, that belong to client projects that are not ongoing, that, I worked on them and now I have them archived essentially. I have those living on Dropbox, and I also have like a mirrored version of them on the computer, so I can just click on them and open them, but like in terms of taking up space on my hard drive, they live there. And I also have backups, don't worry. But that's how I can kind of save space on my Dropbox, or excuse me, on my hard drive. So something I'll do is organize things and archive them and put them in the right folders. I'll go through and I'll delete, inevitably I end up with multiple versions of the rough drafts, especially like, sketches, JPEGs of sketches that I send clients, and I really don't need to keep those. So going through, getting rid of those kinds of things. There is a program that I've gotten, I will mention it, but I'm not going to give it a review because I haven't used it. It's called Gemini, and it finds duplicates of particularly, I think it finds duplicates of any files, but where it's particularly helpful for me is finding duplicates of JPEGs, because I can have like one particular, this is especially true for drafts or versions that I send to, like proofs, things that I send to the client to look at and give me feedback on, but they're not necessarily like the full high res version. I often will end up with like 3 or 4 of those, or sometimes even more. And sometimes it's hard for me to just remember at a glance what needs to be deleted or not. Gemini will find all of those duplicates and just make it easy for you to look through them. So I'm just mentioning that because I got it, because I am hoping that there is a version of future me that will actually sit down to do that. But one tool I do use on this note, on the digital cleanup note, it's made by the same company as Gemini, and it's called, what's the company named? I think the company's like MacPaw or MacPaw or something like that. These are both Mac programs, so I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that up front. But I work on a Mac, I have an iPhone, I have an iPad, I'm pretty much in that ecosystem. But yes, they make this other program called Clean My Mac, and it is just really helpful for like getting rid of trash, really cleaning off your computer in kind of a more deep way than just emptying out your trash. Like it will find old attachments, and you can give it like more or less leeway, and it will also look through and like do kind of malware scans, that sort of thing. So I try to run that at least once every couple of weeks. And my ideal digital cleanup would be like going through my downloads folder, going through my desktop and putting things where they need to be if they need to be saved, and putting other things in the trash, and then running Clean My Mac. And then yes, I am hoping there is this magical future Kendall who will someday decide to put a few hours into going through everything with Gemini and finding all my duplicate files. But yes, digital cleanup, organizing your digital space, that's number 3. Number 4 is to prep materials. So this is something I also find very satisfying, kind of on the same level as like cleaning up or organizing. But for me, it would be like cutting down paper. So pretty much all of the paper I get comes in these giant, like, I think the smallest ones I get are like 24 by 36 or 32, or they're pretty big. And you can even get them bigger than that. But I haven't wanted to take up that much space. So I get these giant sheets, and then I cut them down into anywhere from 8 by 10s to 11 by 14s. It depends on the project, but usually I cut them into at least 4 pieces, so that I can fit them in these flat drawers that I have. And that takes up time. So if I can, I'll just set aside, 30 or 40 minutes to cut down all of the paper that I have. That way it's in the drawer, it's ready to go when I need it, especially if I'm working on a deadline. And then another thing, I don't do this all the time. I feel like this is just very much idealized Kendall, and I wish life was always this way. But if I have a lot of time and that's available, that I am not drawing and I don't want to draw, just sharpening pencils, getting pencils sharpened, gluing my pencil nubs. I'm looking for a pencil nub. Yeah, like gluing this little guy onto a dowel, which is something I do so that I can use up all of the pencil. And before you comment about how there are pencil extenders, I know there are pencil extenders, and I do use those too sometimes, but there comes a point when a pencil extender is no longer useful. I've made lots of content about this. I'm going to stop talking about it. But anyway, that's another thing, another kind of prepping, supply prep type thing that I will do when I have time in the studio that's not spent drawing or painting. Number 5 is to plan a self-initiated project, plan a new self-initiated project. So this could be everything from like coming up with the rough concept to deciding how many pieces you're going to do, to sourcing reference materials or planning what you need to do to shoot the pictures, shoot the photos for the reference materials. I think I've talked about this in other videos, but I really value and have found the practice of like kind of separating the planning of a project from the making of a project. So I will usually have like several different self-initiated pieces planned at any one time, so that if I do have a pause in client work, and I'm not going to do any of these other things that we just talked about, like cleaning up my studio or running clean my Mac or whatever, that I can just pull one of those projects without even having to think about it and just dive right into the making. So for me, if I go back and forth between like plan one and make it, and then plan another one and make it, like it just does, it's much less efficient, and I will do a lot less making, as opposed to if I plan a bunch of things out at once and then do the making. Like that's even how I do videos now. So I'll like plan out videos, write the scripts, get everything ready, get it all kind of laid out, and then spend a day filming a few different videos, which is actually how this video is made. And if you've made it this far into the video, maybe you notice these things, maybe you don't, but I have the same nail polish on in this video as I have in the last 2 videos. And that's because they're all being filmed on the same day, because I like to plan things ahead of time and then all at once and then make them in another sitting. So planning your next self-initiated project, number 5. Number 6 is to plan your calendar and break down your projects. So I do calendaring and planning, like schedule planning, kind of in 2 different parts. So I really am, I need to have like a pen and paper at a certain level. Like if I'm really kind of brainstorming and I'm turning the chaos, making structure out of the chaos, I have to have a pen and paper. I can't do that digitally. There's something about like typing, or even if I'm doing like a one of those like word cloud things, or trying to do something that is more supposedly open-ended on digital, even if I'm doing that on my iPad, like actually physically writing on my iPad, it's just much harder for me to brainstorm. I end up self-editing more. Like even if I'm doing it on my iPad, I'm physically doing the same thing. I'm like writing on a piece of paper, but on the iPad, I'll like hit undo and I'll go back and I'll change something. Whereas if I'm just writing it out on a piece of paper, it doesn't matter. It'll be messy. It'll be ugly. I'll write something a weird way. That's the best, most efficient way for me to get it all out there. So I'll tend to do just like a big mind dump of like all of the things that have to happen, or that I want to happen in the next period of time, whether it's like, a month or a week or 6 months or whatever. I honestly don't tend to plan out much further than 6 months. I might have some like aspirations or things that I would hope would happen, within a year or 2 years, but I don't have any kind of like backwards, like breaking it down, planning from the goal to where I am now. I don't really do any of that beyond 6 months. So yes, I'll have my initial mind dump where I'll just write a bunch of stuff down just in this journal that's behind me. It's actually a sketchbook. So there's like drawings and lists, and half of it, I just like write it all down and I never even look at it again. Probably even more than half of it, to be honest. Like there's just something about getting it out of my brain in that way. And then I'll kind of like look through and pull out, like group things together. And then I use a program called Asana, which is free, or there's a free version. I only use the free version. It's like one of those ones that the free version is actually awesome. It's like really powerful. There's also a desktop and a phone application, mobile application that go with it. And that's what I use once I have kind of like my big overarching goals, the big things that I want to work on, the big projects. Then I move it into Asana to actually break those down into tasks. So, I'll start with the end goal, whether it's like, 8 spot illustrations for client X, or if it's, these 4 personal pieces that I want to make, or these 3 new videos or new class, whatever the end goal is. And then I think backwards of like all the things that need to go into it. And something I have learned, and I continue to learn, is that there are always more things involved, always more steps involved than I think that there are. And I used to have a tendency, trying to be honest and think if I really do still have, I probably still have a tendency to not want to put too many things on the list, to be like, oh, if I'm breaking down this task of like these 8 spot illustrations, for example, I might just say like, okay, well, I got to do the sketch, I got to do the watercolor, I got to do the colored pencil. So there's 3 things, but really I have to research the reference images, and I have to make the sketch, and I have to send in the sketch, and I have to get the notes on the sketch, and I have to fix the sketch, get the sketch approved. Then I have to do the watercolor. And then I have to do the color pencil, and then I have to scan that in, and I have to edit that, and I have to send that to the client and get that approved, and then I have to upload the final, and then I have to invoice for it. So there's like way more things involved, and that's just like for a fairly constrained project. For a bigger project like a class, there are so many tasks, and actually truly being honest when you break down the task, when you break down the goal into those little pieces, for me is really, really helpful. And it increases stress in the moment when I'm making the list, because I'm like, oh gosh, there's so many things. This is going to be impossible. I'm never going to do it. But after that moment, going forward, having them in there gives me like so much peace. I just feel like way less anxious about it, because I really do kind of know what's coming, as opposed to there's like nothing worse for me. I feel like those days where I have like already like 6 or 7 things on my list, or sometimes 10 or 15 things on my list, and I spend all this time doing like 7 different tasks, and then I look back and I've like only really completed one of the things on my list. And that's always a sign to me that I've not really been honest with myself about how much work there really was on something. And sometimes it's not a case of like me not being honest or not wanting to admit. It's more of like, I didn't actually know. But the longer I've been doing this, I know what's really entailed in these things, and what each of these projects really entails. And sometimes I still just don't put those things on the to-do list because what's the because? I think it's because, yes, I don't want to be overwhelmed, but also it allows me to feel like I'm going to get, then I can put like make a class and do these client projects and shoot 3 videos, film 3 videos. I can put all of that on 1 week, when if I actually had all of those broken down honestly and realistically into how many like micro tasks or how many parts of the project there really are, if I saw all of those in 1 week, I would be like, no way, that's not going to happen. It will kind of force me to be more realistic. And I think that's probably where the resistance comes, is me like hoping that I'm going to be able to get way more done than I ever do. But that honestly just leads to disappointment and frustration. So being honest about it, breaking down your tasks, taking your calendar from the big picture down to the very specific and the nitty gritty, that's something, that's a great thing to do if you are in the studio, if you have studio time and you're not feeling like drawing. All right, number 7 is to plan and make social media content. So this is something for me, social media lately is honestly just something that kind of gets squeezed into the margins, and that's okay. That's the season that I'm in right now. But there have been other seasons, and I'm sure there will be seasons again when I actually have time to include the planning of social media content, having specific goals about how many pieces I want to, how many times I want to post, like what kind of content I want to post, and actually having that in the calendar as something that I work on, having those as specific tasks. Right now, it's more just like if I have a few minutes, I'll put something out there. Having that as a possibility, the planning of social media projects is something that is pretty helpful. I hope I will be able to do more of that again. I definitely post more, and I definitely get more out there if I plan about it. And the reality is I'm always making stuff. And so for me, the problem is, I know a lot of people feel this pressure of like, oh, I have to make stuff for social media. I don't feel that pressure. Personally, that's not an issue for me because I am always making stuff. It's more, the burden for me is like, oh, I have to figure out how to share that on social media. Where should that go? Should that go on Twitter? Should it be a time lapse? Should it be a reel? Should it be on TikTok? Like whatever. There's so many different ways to share it now, and that tends to be the part where I get stuck. So some planning around that is really helpful. I'm not talking about, like for me, I'm not talking about planning like a specific series for social media, although that's great and it's totally fine to do that. I almost never do that sort of thing, especially anymore. But just planning like what I am actually going to share, just looking at what I've made in the last few months and being like, okay, this should go online, or this shouldn't because I don't want to make anything like this again. And having some thought that goes behind that. So yeah, that's number 7. All right, number 8 is to update your portfolio. This is really only applicable if you're kind of like a commercial artist or an artist who's working with clients, or if you're doing this as a vocation. You know, if this is something that you do that's personally fulfilling, and that's, you know, there isn't really any commercial component to it, then, you know, you probably don't have a portfolio. But, you know, even if you're like just trying to do like local gallery shows, or you have an Etsy, or, you know, anything from that to working with large commercial clients, you probably have some form of a portfolio, some place online that's like a gathering place for your best work, the work that you most want to be known for, the work that you want to make more of. So yeah, updating that's another great thing to do if you have some studio time. Another thing that I am absolutely terrible at doing. So I'm kind of realizing as I walk through this, that this list is also just like a reminder for me of the things that I need to like be intentional about and spend some more time on when I have that flexibility. But yes, number 8, updating your portfolio. Number 9, these are getting kind of simpler here as we get to the end. Number 9 is to take a walk. And sometimes if you are not feeling like drawing or painting, and you have this time that you're able to be in the studio, the best thing is actually just to shut the door on the studio and to, you know, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be taking a walk. It could be like taking a walk, watching a movie, getting a coffee, calling a friend, getting a snack, any of those other things that actually do like let you have a little bit of space from it, both mentally and physically. That can be one of the most motivating ways to get you back into the art making. Counterintuitively is to, you know, go further away from it. And then number 10 is to do a little reflection and ask yourself why you don't feel like making art. So that is not necessarily what you should do in every circumstance, but if you find that you're in this situation more and more, that, you know, maybe if you have a day job or you work with clients a lot like me, and then you have just very small windows of time where you can work on personal projects. And if you find more and more that in those windows of time, your emotional response to the thought of making art is like, I don't want to, like it's a heaviness, it's a dread almost, like you don't want to go there. It's good to ask yourself why, like why is that feeling coming up? And I'm not going to give an answer here because I don't know what that would be for you. But, you know, if this is a pattern, if you have, you know, spent some of your studio times doing some of these other non-art making things, and each time you go back, it just keeps coming up, you don't want to make art, it's worth reflecting on. It's worth, thinking about why that's coming up for you. Yeah, break out your journal, do a little writing, do a little journaling, try to think through that. And that is number 10. So yes, hope you like this video, kind of a low-key one. But yes, I have enjoyed making it, enjoyed chatting through these things with you guys. So thank you very much for watching if you're still here. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody else who might appreciate it. If you have questions, ideas for future videos, comments, emojis, whatever, leave those in the comments. Thank you again for watching. Thank you to my patrons for sponsoring, and thank you to Meg for editing. I hope everybody has a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye.